Hello, this is Elaine Littaw, and I had several friends asking me how to begin a braided rug. There are better tutorials on YouTube, but I told my friends I would start this. I began doing braided rugs because I write Christian historical fiction books, and I wanted a feel for how they did things in those days, so that gave me the feel. I start with a scrap of fabric kind of like this. It's a little outdated. The copyright on it is like 1988, so the colors are a little dated, but don't worry about the pattern. That looks like a quilt. Some of these were very wild flower patterns, and really I did not know how they were going to work out, but when they're braided they look completely different. They just look like color. The easiest one to start with would probably be the round, because you don't have to do any planning. You just put braids on until you get the size you want. The one that takes a little more planning is the oblong one, and that is because if you want it longer and don't want it wider, you're just stuck, because like if you only want it to that red area there, you couldn't make it any longer because you can't add just to the ends. So when you're planning this, figure out if you want a really skinny, long, narrow one, and maybe plan about a foot at each end of your middle strip, and figure out how long you want it. If you want it 7 feet long, then make sure this is like 5 feet, so that you'd have a foot on each end, and then it give you a foot on each end this way. Okay, or if it doesn't matter to you and you want it as wide as it will get whenever you make it just a medium length like I did here, that doesn't bother me, because it's about, if it's lined up right, it's about the width of my door, so that's fine. All right, let me show you. I start with fabric like this, like I said before, and when I get the fabric, I tear it into strips. Now I have a heavy cast iron toy here to hold this, but these are the strips, and usually I take these strips and I sew them at the top, but right for this purpose I'm just pinning them, but I fold them under the edges under like this on each strip, okay, so that there's no raw stuff going on that I have to tuck under or anything. Okay, so I'm going to put this heavy thing on here. You can, if you are up where your sewing machine is or over, however it may be, you can put your presser foot down to hold the end, and that works well. But you tuck these under like this, okay, and you begin to braid. Now, I may not be the best braider, I don't know, I didn't have a little girl, but I just braid. And if the braids are not perfect, that's okay, it usually comes out fine. And like after you see this braid, you will just think this is some kind of print, and not actually a printed on quilt top, and it will just look totally different to you. Okay, let me put this. Okay, I'm still braiding. And it does take a lot of fabric, and what I like about that is I have stashes of fabric from probably the 70s. My sister gave me all my mother's scraps. Let me scoot this on up here. And I have scraps of fabric from when I used to make my mother her house dresses. Well, I guess I made some of her church dresses too. She taught me how to sew, and then she wanted me to have good practice. Well, that's sweet. And I got some good practice back then, and it's come in handy now. But anyway, I had like bags and totes and all kind of stuff of all these scraps. Well, I didn't want to throw them away, so I started making quilts. Well, all my quilts started to look very similar because they all had the same patterns or same fabrics in them, the same colors over and over. So I decided I needed some rag rugs for my solarium for one thing, and for another thing, I wanted to have some fresh fabric for different quilts that I might want to make here in the future. So, and I want to tell you about my copper gloves since I see them here. I have a copper glove for my right hand I forgot to put on. But the copper I don't notice doing anything, but I like the compression. I got these at Walmart. You can get them probably lots of places, but I just happened to see them on the shelf and got them to try to help with some kind of cramping pain I have in my hands. And this works. The compression works. I don't know that the copper is doing anything. But anyway, just in case you're wondering, see my black hand here with the dots on it, and you think, what's that? And oh my goodness. And some people just tell me, well, quit doing all this work with your hands. You're kind of dumb to keep on doing this hand work when your hands hurt you at night and wake you up and things like that. But you know what? I cannot sit still. I don't know. I just like to create things. I like to write books. But when you get stuck on a scene in a book, I always think of books like a movie scene. So instead of chapters, I write scenes. On the book, they look like chapters, but in my head, they're scenes. So when I get stuck on a scene, sometimes it's just best to be doing something, some busy work, something like that. Okay, so I've come to the end of this. I don't have my pins with me, or I would just pin this right here to hold this. But this is a very basic thing that you do. This is how you start the very middle of your quilt. Okay, you're supposed to have this sewed at the end. I'll pin this with this pin on this end. Okay, and you start with this end. Okay, you kind of tuck it under like this. Then you lay it flat. And I do this on my sewing machine usually. And when I lay it flat, I run a seam across like this. A zigzag. I use the widest stitch and longest zigzag stitch when I do this on my machine. And I always do it on my machine. I tried to do it with by hand, and that is truly a hand killer. Well, then what you do is you go like this, and you run your zigzag right down that little crack there between the two. And then you twist this, and you give it kind of a little, you kind of bunch it up a little bit at the ends, like that. This is like if you're doing a round rug, okay? You just go like this, okay? And and you're seaming this as you go. You're stitching it as you wind it around. Stitch, 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 stitch. Okay. And when you come to the end, you get your next piece of fabric, and the right sides together, just like you do for a dress. Do your strip, right sides together, right sides together, right sides together. Put this on your presser foot, and then braid the next strip, okay? And you can change colors at each juncture, or you can kind of do it in a pattern like the last one I did, where you have like a lot of this in the very middle, and then you add another color as you come to the end. Let me show you how to do an oblong one. If you're, let's say you're making, this an oblong quilt. I mean, not quilt, rug. You turn this, let's say this is like 3 feet long. It's not, but you put the part that's started here, and then when you get to the length you want it to be, you turn it on the end, and then you zigzag right there, zigzag all the way down until you've gone the whole way. And then you come to the end and you turn it, like on the end. And this is all zigzag together. See, I might not be explaining this real good, but say this is the longer than it looks right here, than it is right here. You add more fabric to it, and you just keep winding it and adding fabric, winding it and adding fabric. What I say is, when you turn corners, or whenever you feel like, you don't stretch this as you're sewing it. You don't go like this and sew. See, that will stretch. But when you come upon a corner, you kind of push it together and mash it, see, to give it an easement, so that this won't stand up like a bowl when you get done. You have to smash it and then sew that together right there really good with your sewing machine, and go on. And all it is this repeated, and then whenever you get to the end here, you mash this and go on down, so that, and if it does bowl up on you at the end, you can use, or I always have to use, a steam iron, and I just lay it on top for a long time, not until it scorches, but I lay it and steam, and then I pull myself away from it and let it sit without moving it for quite a while, and it will kind of stay that way. Now, like I say, these rugs are not perfection, and this one is just, there's a little bit of rhyme and reason to the colors, not really. I just changed colors whenever I came to it, as you can see on that yellow braid hitting the black and red one. You don't have to, it's not a perfect science. It does, like this one where the yellow one hits the green, and where the pink hits the yellow. They're a rag rug. They're supposed to be made from scraps, and sometimes people don't have that many scraps. So this is the latest one. Now, it had a little more pattern to it because I just had specific amounts of fabric. And what I did is, like this fabric right here, I knew I didn't have very much of it in this fabric, so I tried to make it kind of close to the middle, so I'd at least have 2 rounds of it. If I wanted 3 rounds, I would have put that where the camel color is. But you can kind of, if you just have a little bit of a certain fabric, you put that toward the middle, and if you want several rounds of other fabrics, the ones that you have the most of, you put toward the edges. That's for one that's very planned. Anyway, I hope this little video helped you today, and if you have any questions, write in the comments.